I am so glad that you guys have joined us for Season 5 of the Manlihood Mancast. You guys have made this journey of making this podcast something phenomenal. Honestly, those of you who are a part of our Manlihood Man Cave Facebook group, the interaction that we have there, those of you who send me messages or talk to me in person, which happens quite a bit actually, and you let me know what a difference this makes in your life. And honestly, that is super encouraging to me. I am excited and so glad to be a part of creating this content for you. We get to explore the ideas behind masculinity and manhood and what it means to be a good man, and we get to really unpack it, and we get to talk about how to be a better man, how we can level up in all areas of our life. And this season is going to be something really exciting. We've started to interview some amazing guests. I'm hoping to bring you one of those every week, in addition to our shorter form podcasts where I talk about my thoughts. It's really awesome to be able to hear from all kinds of thought leaders in the industry, from influencers, from men who have been there and done that. And honestly, today's guest has been there and done that. Larry Hagner has done some amazing work. He started a podcast. It was the Good Dad Project, and now it's called The Dad Edge. And his podcast is highly recognized. It's been recognized in all kinds of publications for men as one of the best podcasts out there for dads, fathers, and for men. So please make sure you check out his work. But his conversation with me was fantastic. I loved being able to really get into the meat and the heart of what makes this guy tick. And I think you guys are going to appreciate it too.
Are you ready to live life to the full? Are you ready to rise up and live a life of honor? Are you ready to boldly step into a life of courage? This is the Manlihood Mancast, and here's your host, Josh Atcher.
Larry, it is great to have you on the Manlihood Mancast. I really appreciated the work that you're doing at the Good Dad Project and the Dad Edge. Tell me more about your story and what you're doing.
So where do you want me to start? I can start, I really think that this whole thing actually started when I was a kid, if I'm just being real with you. So I'm happy to start there. Definitely have a story to share that probably most people haven't heard or experienced. So I can definitely do that if you want.
Sure.
All right, cool. So, I'm 45. I grew up, my parents, my mom and biological father were married in 71. They were married about 4 years, had me in 75. And then it was about 9 months after I was born, they completely split up. From what I understand, I think the divorce was really bitter because he just completely, left. And so I remember, I'm 45. I remember being 4 years old. I remember being in preschool, and it was just me and my mom. And I remember these men coming to pick up their kids from preschool. And so I knew what a dad was. I still remember this, like guys coming in suits and, maybe they were painters. They'd come in like full of paint, but I saw men, and I knew what a dad was, and I knew we didn't have one, but it didn't make any difference to me because I didn't know any different. I just figured moms go out and find dads. So when I was 4, my mom had been dating this guy that she'd been working with. I had never met him. She decided to have him over for dinner one night. And I'll never forget, man. I'll never forget this. Like, the guy walks in our house and he's got a suit on. He's a white collar data software engineer. He's got a double Windsor tie. He's got the vest. He's got the trench coat. He's got a briefcase, the handlebar mustache. His hair is feathered. But it was the first time I ever saw like this male presence, like, walk through my door. I was like, wow, man, this is crazy. This must be what a dad is, right? So like the very first question I asked this guy, I shake his hand and I ask him, are you going to be my dad? And I just remember like the oxygen, man, just being sucked out of the room. Like my mom, like I felt like even my mom might've gasped for a second. Like, oh my God, I can't believe he just asked that. And what I truly believe though, is I think my mom took that as a sign, and within a year they were married. I was in the wedding, and they were married for 6 years. And what I can tell you is if anybody who ever knew my stepdad, and he adopted me and everything, I actually still to this day have his last name. They would tell you, man, that guy's the most polite guy in the world. He's so nice. Everything is please and thank you and gentle and empathy and all this stuff, right? And he was when he was sober. And then when he drank, it was a totally different side. It was Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. And I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that there were beatings, there was slaps to the face. There was, pushing me down. There was throwing me, like all this stuff. And I remember every year that they were married up until I was 10, it just got worse and worse. At one point, he lost his job when I was about 9. And that's when I remember their relationship just completely crumbled. He would sleep downstairs on the cold tile floor. My mom would sleep upstairs. There were times as a kid, I'd go down there and make sure he was still alive. It was just crazy. And then when they parted ways, I've never seen him since. In fact, I know I got word about 7 years ago he passed away, but I've never seen him since I was 10. So lost my biological father, lost my stepdad before the age of 10. At that point in time, I really started to ask questions like, hey, where did I even come from? Like, he obviously wasn't my dad. I remember being in the wedding. My mom told me about being married. She showed me photos of their wedding. So I knew this guy's name, knew what he looked like. I remember like sneaking away and grabbing their wedding album just so I could see this guy's face. So I could see like, well, what does he look like? What was he like? Like I would study these photos and be like, what was he like? And then when I was 12, so just 2 years later, I actually met him kind of by mistake though. It was not on purpose. It was a mistake. I won't get into the details of why or how, but we ended up having this relationship. He was remarried at the time, had a 2-year-old son, another one on the way. And our relationship lasted 6 months. And I remember the beginning of that relationship, I was so jazzed to be reunited with my dad. I called him dad right out of the gate. I was like, oh my God, this is gonna be the most epic relationship ever. I wanted it so bad. And what I could tell is there was some discomfort there with him, like I always felt, right? And then the very last month that we had this relationship, I could tell it's kind of like the best way I could describe it is imagine dating someone and they're not into you anymore. And you just, it's never said, but it's felt, right? And I knew that there was something there. And I've always had this ability to read people, even as a kid. And I remember going to him and having this conversation at 12 and saying, hey, what's going on? I feel like something's not right. And I don't remember exactly what words were used, but that was the end of our relationship. And the theme that really came out of that conversation was it's me, it's not you. And this is complicated. And then we parted ways, and that was devastating, man. I kind of gave up, became really overweight, ate my emotions away, gave up on a lot of things. I failed the 8th grade, had to do 8th grade twice. I got into a good high school. I actually went to college, finished college, met my college sweetheart, married her. And then this story kind of ends, but yet begins when I was 30 years old, married, at a business meeting at a coffee house here in St. Louis, had my first son on the way. One thing I can tell you about Starbucks is two things are certain. Number one, you'll always overpay for coffee. That's number one. Number two, you might run into a biological parent that you haven't seen in 18 years. And my dad came walking through that coffee shop that day. And I knew exactly who he was. He was just a little older, but still looked the same. And I won't go into the details of how we actually met, but we did. And here we are 16 years later, and I've got a relationship with him. Now, what I can tell you is I grew up, my mom was married a total of 3 times. She dated several men between each marriage. Every guy was the same guy, just a different face and different name. A partier, alcohol, drugs, really didn't want much to do with me, everything to do with my mom. Always some level of severe toxicity in there, that just didn't sit right. So I knew when I became a father, I was like, I'm going to be a good father. And the things that happen to me are not going to happen on my watch. And What I could tell you is I spent the first 6 years of being a father lost, without patience, without any skills. I was winging it. I was doing fatherhood from kind of like this arm's length. I wasn't really in my kids' lives very much as I wanted to be, but I just didn't know how. And Dad Edge started almost 10 years ago, and it started on a really dark moment. My 13-year-old, who was 4 at the time, stepped out of line. I spanked him. He hit the ground. And when that happened, I went to go pick him up, and he had this look of absolute terror in his eyes. Like, he looked at me like I was a monster. And in that moment, I saw myself, because I remember getting beatings like that. And in that moment, I was like, I can't believe I just did this. Like, this is exactly what I've set out not to do. What I can tell you without a shadow of doubt, whatever we resist, it will persist. It's kind of like if I tell you not to think of the word elephant, right? And I was doing all the things that I was trying to set out not to do. And it was in that moment, I was like, that's it. That's it. And I went into my office and I did what every single adult does when they have a bad moment. I went and got on social media to just distract myself. Literally had tears in my eyes as I'm scrolling through Facebook, trying to forget what I just did. And I saw this button in the left-hand corner. It said, create a page. I don't know what it was. I'm a big faith guy. I believe that was the hand of God just saying, this is the time for you to surrender and learn how to do this. I hit that button. I wrote the words, The Good Dad Project, started a page, and The Good Dad Project was me. I was the project. And I decided in that moment, I'm going to learn something new every day, and I'm going to post it here. And I'm not going to do it for a following. I could care less if anybody follows me, but I'm going to just post things here and keep a record of what I'm learning. And that was it. A year later, started a blog. 2015, started the podcast, wrote my first book. 2016, we started Dad Edge Alliance, our mastermind, to help men optimize the 5 dimensions of being a husband, father, and man. And here we are, 750 episodes into the podcast, almost 700 members in our mastermind. It has been the most fulfilling work on the planet. And what I can tell you is that when it comes to fatherhood and marriage, all these things are skills. All of them are skills, but we don't look at it that way. We look at it as, I should know how to do this naturally. This should come naturally to me because I love my family. And then we self-sabotage because we don't know how to do it. And there is nothing more freeing than learning skills that you can implement into being a better man, husband, and father, to connect with your kids, communicate with your wife, elevate intimacy, all these things that are so important that most of us, we just don't know how to do it. But yeah, that's how everything was birthed.
Dude, I am really thankful that you shared the story from the beginning. You know, a lot of people pick up with, oh, hey, we've got a podcast, we've got a blog, and I'm doing this and doing that. And honestly, even a lot of men who have grown up in your situation don't talk about it. They'll say, oh man, I never really had a dad. Right. And, you know, like there's a story there. And I think that story really matters to a lot of people. And I'm thankful that you shared it. I think
thank you.
I think that when we look at that and we're real with it, we can start working through what it means. You know, and manlyhood is the same way. You know, it started out of, I had a great dad who really invested in me, and I'm so thankful and grateful for that. And, you know, it changed my world in so many ways, because it could have been a completely different story. But I knew that there were things that I needed to work on and things that I needed to learn. And I found myself at a rock bottom moment too, you know, and I'm like, all right, what do I know for sure? You know, what things do I know that are true? And that's kind of what started it, was just me trying to remind myself of the things that my dad taught me, the things that I knew that were true, so that I could learn it and work through it. And yeah, similar. You know, I tell people all the time, man, when we post something, we talk about something, it's as much for me as it is for you, you know?
Amen. Amen to that. Yeah, you're exactly right.
So I love that you are taking your journey and your process, and then you're also saying, let's do this together. You know, you're inviting people to join you in it. And What does it look like now for your family? You talked about that moment where your 13-year-old was 4 and it was a scary moment. What does it look like now? What does your family look like?
So what it looks like now is I'm still married by the grace of God to the same woman. We'll celebrate 18 years of marriage this year. I've known her for 25 years. I met her in 1996 when she was a freshman in college. I was a sophomore. We have 4 boys. I have a 15-year-old, I have a 13-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And, not every day is sunshine and rainbows, right? There are bad moments, there are good moments every single day. But what I can tell you is that, and I say this with a lot of gratitude, and because I've been blessed with a lot of grace. I've got an excellent relationship with all 4 of my boys. I have an incredible relationship with my 2 older ones, especially. And I don't say that to compare to the littles that are 7 and 5, but it's different. They're like young adults now. Right. And, what I can tell you is over time, these things didn't happen by accident, but my kids will tell me anything. Some of the things that they tell me, I'm like, I wouldn't have said that out loud to a trusted individual, no one, when I was at their age, right? Could be something that they're doing, something that they're seeing, whatever else, right? But I've really prided myself on creating what's called an environment of psychological safety with my kids, to where we have a connection. That's not to say that their life is discipline free. They get disciplined plenty, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I am the person that I always say, hey, if you want to talk about anything, I'm your guy, right? You want to ask me about sex? I'll tell you everything you want to know. And I can even do it in the most vulgar way, because I want you to hear it from me. I don't want you trying to figure this out on your own on the internet, talking to your friends that don't know much more than you do. Come and talk to me. I will tell you anything and everything you want to know. You will never be judged. You will never be shamed. That's the relationship that we have. I'm really big on connecting one-on-one with each boy. I'm really big on rites of passage from my boys. I've taken my 2 older ones on those. I'm big on communication. Those are the things that solidify a relationship between a father and a kid.
Yeah. Yeah. I had something similar with my sons when they entered manhood. Both my 2 sons are grown now, and they're both different, and every kid is different. And so, you could think you can have a standard for your oldest, and then your next one comes along and you're like, well, you're a different kid, but as when they each turned 18, I gave them something special that was a special moment for them to mark them as a man. And it was kind of fun. It was kind of a neat experience. But here's a question for you. Have you ever had those moments when you screw up? Do your kids ever throw the dad's edge in your face? They were like, yeah, you think you're the great dad in the whole world and telling everybody else, but they ever do that to you?
No, they actually don't.
That's good.
I'm surprised, because that could be the easy button right there, right?
Yeah. Well, if they watch this episode, they might. So you might not want to.
Right. Yeah. No, I keep this level of humility with my kids constantly. Yeah. I am way harder on myself openly than my kids could probably ever be. In fact, my kids are usually the ones who are throwing me the rope, because when I screw up, because I do, I'll go to them and I'll be like, I shouldn't have talked to you that way. Right. I shouldn't have said some of the things that I said to you. That was really wrong. Right. And that is completely and totally out of my core values as your father and as a man. Right. Now, when I say I'm apologizing for something, it's not like my kids are raised in a great environment. They are not verbally abused, but like, I will lose my cool and lose my temper, raise my voice, right, from time to time when I don't hone in that skill of patience. And I'll come to them and sometimes go overboard with the apology. And my kids, especially the older ones, are like, Dad, it's fine. Like, don't be so hard on yourself. Like, and one of the biggest compliments that I always get, and I get it from my 13-year-old and my 15-year-old a lot, is they'll say, I love my life. And then I'll ask them like, well, why do you love your life? Like, I don't know. I love my life because I always feel good being here at home. I always feel good having my friends here at home. And that tells me that we're creating this environment, of psychological safety for these kids. My wife and I joke about it. It's a curse and it's a blessing at the same time. Our kids always want to be around us. And that's a blessing and a curse, because there are a lot of times where you're just like, I'm as you're talking to me right now, the reason my voice sounds the way it does is because I'm recovering from COVID, and I'm definitely on the upswing. But we've been quarantined as a family, and we have done everything together for the past week and a half, 2 weeks. And there was one night where we told the boys, we're like, why don't you guys go downstairs and watch one of your movies and play, and allow me and mom to hang out up here tonight, to catch up. Right. And my kids are like, no, yeah, we got to be together as a family. And we're like, we want that too. But mom and I haven't caught up in like 10 days, and we have to for our relationship. Right. And, but yeah, I always watch. Those are the breadcrumbs that I really watch for. Do my kids want to be around us? Do they feel that environment of psychological safety? Do they bring their friends here? Do they talk to me about anything? No holds barred. And those types of things.
And I've found that in those later teen years, they may rebel against it anyway, just because they do. I think it's part of nature. You may encounter that. You might not, but they might be like, oh, I'm done. I can't stand this anymore. Especially I think 19-year-olds, if they're still kind of around, and their moms, especially, man, it's like 19, a switch flips and the mom wants to eat her young, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
But, and if that does happen, just to give you a little forewarning, because we've been through some of that, that's a short period, and it's not long before they start out on their own and they're paying bills and they're like, you were so right. So even if there is a little period in there, if that does happen, don't worry. But anyway, I just share that because I know that, we had a little bit of that with each of ours. We have 3 that are grown, and there was that time period there where they're like, I want to do it my way, and okay, you go right ahead.
Yeah.
And it wasn't always easy, but we get there.
Yeah.
So tell me, one of the questions I've got for you, because I know that this is what you're doing with the Good Dad Project and with the Dad Alliance. You talk about, tools for dads. What kind of tools does a dad need in his toolbox?
There's a lot of them, and you have to know when to use what tool for what. You're not gonna screw a screw into a wall with a hammer, right? I use that analogy as like, if your wife came to you and was venting to you about something, if you go to fix her problem with a hammer, she might be like, all I wanted you to do is listen. And then maybe that's your screwdriver, right? Your screwdriver is your listening skills, right? So
I think that it would be really great to talk about the kids in particular, and kids in marriage, because, I know that I talk about mindset quite a bit on my own. And I think that might be a hole that our listeners would appreciate, would be to talk specifically about the kids, especially. I think the thing that really attracted me to what you're putting out is that parenting message is it's not out there. I think most parents just send their kids off to school and expect the school to raise them, so.
Yeah.
So definitely, I think that's a big need that I think would be good to talk about.
Sure. So when it comes to kids, here are some of the pillars that are most important, right? Kids need 3 things from us. They need to feel seen, they need to feel heard, and they need to feel that they have an environment of psychological safety. Those are 3 things. That's how kids thrive: seen, heard, environment of psychological safety. And we can talk about each one of those. How you develop those is how you, number 1, interact with them and how you communicate with them. Now, I'll tell you what not to do. What not to do is when your kids come to you to talk to you and use the word why. Get the word why completely out of your vocabulary. So if your kid comes to you and is like, hey, Dad, I got a D on the science test, right? And you're like, wait, why'd you get a D on the science test? Why did that happen? Now that's a knee-jerk reaction that a lot of dads would have, right? I've had it. Now, a communication skill is using something, you take the why out. It's like, you got a D? Okay. Tell me about that. Now, I just did the same thing that I did asking why. Okay, you got a D. Tell me more. Well, I got a D, like the test was really, really hard, blah, 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 blah. Now, I'm not going to sit there and be like, well, how much did you study? I'm going to sit there and be like, okay. I was like, what do you think would have made some of the questions maybe easier? I should have studied a little more. Okay, great. How long did you study? I studied about 30 minutes. Okay. And you got a D. You studied for 30 minutes, you got a D. What do you think would have been the optimal time to study for this test? I probably could have used like at least an hour. Okay, great. So sounds like you got a D because maybe you feel like you didn't put the time in that you needed to. Yeah, that's what it is. Okay. Well, what did we learn from this? Well, we learned that like, I just need to study more the next time I have a test. Yeah, man, good on you. Perfect. When's your next test? My next test is next Friday. I've got a test in English. Okay, great. So how would it feel if I maybe just held you accountable to make sure that you put the time in the next time you have a test? How does that feel? And that would be great. Okay, let's do just that. And that's how you have that. So what I did in that moment, now what I can tell you what I used to do is be like, why'd you get a D on the test? Well, I didn't study. Why didn't you study? You know better. You know you're supposed to study. Come on, right? Well, the next time you have a test, I'm going to make you sit down and I'm going to make you study an hour. And oh, by the way, your phone is mine until next Friday. Now, what did I just do? I laid down the hammer. You think that kid's going to come and tell me they got a D on the next test? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. There are ways that you can create this environment of psychological safety. When it comes to something like a test, right? I don't necessarily worry about the disciplinary action because they can self-correct that, right? But you have to allow them to learn through questions that you're guiding them through. Because the moment you start telling them how to do something, right, in a very demeaning way is the moment that they make the decision that I am not hearing you, right? Number one. And number two, I'm sure as heck ain't coming to you the next time I get a bad grade.
Right. He's fine. I love it. Nothing wrong with that. That's cool.
They always like, especially him. That's my 7-year-old. He is notorious for podcast bombing. I had Chris Voss on the podcast about 1.5 years ago. He's the chief hostage negotiator for the FBI. And he came walking in and all of a sudden Chris is like, who's this guy? And then Lawson and Chris end up having like this 2-minute dialogue. It was hysterical.
That's awesome. For anybody that's listening instead of watching, Larry's son walked in and was waving at me, which is kind of cool. I love it. I think it's really neat.
And you notice I didn't really miss a beat. It's like this is normal.
Totally it is. It is. That is life,
Yeah.
So it sounds to me when you're describing that kind of form of parenting, I mean, that's probably more valuable than any school education that they're going to get, because what you're teaching them is how to solve the problem for themselves instead of how to, just be disciplined. You're teaching them how to self-discipline.
Exactly. Yeah. And when it comes, I'm a big proponent. I'm a big fan of natural consequences. I'll sit down with my kids and be like, listen, I'm not going to punish you. And then I'll ask them, I'll be like, I want you to think about something though for a moment. I actually had to have this very talk with my 13-year-old about grades. My 13-year-old is one of those kids that I hated growing up because he never studies and he gets B's and A's on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And
That was me.
oh God, I hate it. I had to make homemade flashcards, hours of studying just to get a C or a B. But anyway, so my 13-year-old got an F in his ELA class, his English language arts class, and he's never gotten an F. Report card came home, and this was for the semester, right? This was in December. And I saw his report card, and he came home, and I was pissed because he got an F for the quarter as well, and now got an F for a semester. And I was now the freaking daddy bear in me, right, wanted to just lash out and just, barrel right into him, right? You know better. This is not you, So he came home, and I was like, hey, I got your report card today. He's like, how'd I do? I was like, pretty good. I was like, you got A's and B's and everything. Great job. You did get a grade that I don't know if you realized what you got. I was like, do you know what you got in ELA? He's like, yeah, I got a C. I was like, you didn't. He's like, what did I get? I was like, you got an F for the semester, Mason. And you could just see like he was just floored, right? And he's not a crier. He's a pretty tough kid. He's a football player, and these tears just welled up in his eyes. Now he's being harder on himself than I could ever be, right? And I said, Mason, what happened? And he's like, I had a huge assignment and I didn't turn it in on time. It was worth half my grade. Okay. All right. And I took him through the same thing. What did we learn here? Right. And I took that a step further. I was like, listen, man, I'm not going to punish you because I know that this is not you, right? This was a miss. But number one, let's talk about how we fix it. Number one. Number two, I want you to think about something for a moment. You got an F for the semester. You get an F for next semester. You got to take summer school. What would be your ideal dream summer break be like? He's like, oh, I would do this, this, and this. I'm like, you think we could do that if you were in summer school? What would that look like if you're in summer school? You got to go every day. He's like, no, I wouldn't be able to do those things. I'm like, okay. So what would it feel like if you passed with flying colors next semester and we didn't have to worry about summer school? What would that summer feel like? It would feel amazing. So like really leveraging the natural consequences of what could happen or what did happen or what's going to happen naturally versus what am I going to do to lay the iron fist down, right?
Yeah, definitely. I found an issue that we've been having with our kids too is sometimes these teachers aren't processing the grades in time. So they'll turn in assignments on time, but then they don't. Then the grade book comes out and it's like, why do you have an F on your progress report? And they're like, I have no idea. And then, then you talk to the teacher and they're like, well, it'll probably be an A once I get everything. And I'm like, that doesn't ever make sense to me because, we always had like you started with an A and then you lost points is kind of almost how it worked, So, and then, you're trying to not teach them how to be, I'm trying to teach them how to take personal responsibility, but then when it actually is somebody else's fault, that's always a little tricky too, but we're working through it. Right.
Yeah.
So, do you have a lot of rules for your kids at all? Do you find that, having, hey, you've got to do X, Y, and Z or have chores and things like that? What does that look like for you? So
my kid, we do have rules. We do have boundaries. What we do is, so our kids, we have diehard rules around screens. Our kids, our two older kids do have phones, but they're dumb phones. They're iPhones with Safari not on it. They can watch TikTok and they can watch YouTube, but they only get an hour of that a day. And then those apps shut down. They can't access them. They can send a request for more time, which they usually don't get. But we do allow them time and space to do what I call completely ineffective things, like, right? Because you can't always be pushing a kid to be super effective all the time. They need those breaks. TikTok drives me crazy. I don't even know why someone would waste their time on that. Some of the things that some of the YouTubers that they subscribe to, like, I'm just like unspeakable. I'm like, are there people really this dumb in the world that do this crap? Like, that's kind of like my view of it. However, it's also part of being a kid. So screens are a big deal. We have what's called a screen candy and a screen vegetable. Screen candy is something like TikTok, right? It's just nonsense. A screen vegetables were like, hey, let's leverage a screen to learn something new, right? There's all kinds of educational things we can do on screens. The other thing too is my kids, they have, I mean, this may sound very lenient, but during the school year, they have one chore a day. That's it. I'm a big proponent of my kids learning responsibility. So when they come home from school, they cannot get on a screen. They have to do a chore that we assign them. When it comes to dinner time, everybody has a job. Somebody clears the table, somebody sets the table, somebody empties the dishwasher, somebody's cleaning the dishes, somebody's doing the countertop, somebody's sweeping the floor. We all pitch in. When it comes to, I do have rules around, we're probably more strict on our kids than the average. You know, I've heard my kids will tell me like friends of mine get 8 hours a day of screen time. I'm like, well, good for them. Not here. The other thing too is that my kids, we enjoy having their friends here so we can get to know who they're hanging with, and we can always create that environment here where the kids can always be here. We've actually built our home around that type of environment. We just got done with a big backyard project where it's a huge gathering space back there, and we did that on purpose. And I'll tell you kind of a funny story. So my neighbor up the street just bought a brand new C8 Corvette, like one of the ones that look like the Lamborghinis, right? And my 15-year-old and I were in our backyard with this new project, and it's huge back there, and the kids are all playing, and we've got pizza, and we've got soda, and we're playing music. We've got, it sounds expensive, but it's not. It's actually really cheap. We have an outdoor theater out there. We bought a $150 blow up screen. You plug it in, it blows up. I've had a projector that I bought super cheap a long time ago. We've got speakers out there. So we'll watch a movie out there. And my son goes, hey man, like, when are you going to buy a nice car? Cause I don't have a nice car. I will never have a nice car. I drive a 2016 Nissan Altima. I have no desire to buy a new car. And I was like, what do you mean by that? He's like, well, you got the money like to buy a Corvette, like so-and-so, like, why don't you buy a Corvette? I was like, I did buy a Corvette. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, you're sitting in it. And we were in our backyard, you know? And I was like, and your friends who are all here enjoying like the music and the movie and the pizza, they're sitting in my Corvette. And he's like, I don't understand. And I was like, well, according to the person that I am and what I value, I spend my money where my family gathers and connects, not on toys. So like, sure, could I buy a Corvette? Of course I could. But then I only have you in that Corvette. None of your friends, not your mom, not your brothers. And what use would that Corvette even be? Now we've got 7 of your friends, 7 of your brother's friends. We're playing music. We're having a blast out here. I'd much rather spend my Corvette here. Wouldn't you? And he's like, yeah, good choice. So, you know, those are just some of the things that we do, like the environment that we create. And then as far as like, I'll say the other thing too, around boundaries, rules, we speak to each other respectfully here. The one thing that I do not tolerate is you never disrespect your mother. That's my wife. She comes before you do. Now, when I say that, I mean, like, I'm talking like fractions of a millifraction of a millifraction, right? But I'm married first and a father second. And the rule is you do not disrespect my wife in this house. And to be honest, we've never had a problem with that. Never had my kids talk back, yell, scream, do something like where you're just like, whoa. But they know that rule, they follow it very well.
Speaking of which, you know, we talked a little bit about how marriage is something that you know well, that you like to talk about. You know, I kind of am of the mindset that the most important thing you can give your kids is to love their mom. You know, yeah. I mean, I think you probably agree with that. How do you balance, you know, the pressures of being a dad with being a husband? How do you make that work?
I don't look at, so number one, I don't look at it as pressure. I look at it as a responsibility that I thoroughly enjoy. So like, for instance, this may sound narcissistic, and I don't mean it to be, because I'm not narcissistic, but what I'll do when we're together as a family is sometimes I'll watch myself in the third person. In other words, I want to watch myself the way my kids might be seeing me. So like, for instance, I will purposely and intentionally compliment their mom in front of them, right? I will purposely and intentionally be over the top affectionate with their mom in front of them, because I want them to see that, right? If their mom walks in, to the room and she's all dialed up, I'll be like, my gosh, you just look breathtaking, right? And my kids, when my wife walks into a room all dressed up, they'll actually wait for me to say something at this point, because they know me so well, because they always like to joke with me, because like I always have this look on my face of like, oh my God. Right. So the other thing too is, and I'll make sure to do that when my wife is not dressed up as well. Right. Just look beautiful today. Or I will acknowledge and appreciate her for something. Like she spent all day yesterday putting together this 15-foot by 13.5-foot fort in our basement for the boys, because we're in quarantine right now. And over dinner, I told my wife, I was like, I just want to honor you. What an amazing mom you are, that you took time to tape these boxes together and to make a 6-bedroom fort that's 15 by 13.5 feet. And just such a really cool experience, And I want to make sure my boys hear that stuff, right? Because that's how they're going to learn, how to treat their women when they get older.
Exactly. I think that might be what is lacking with a lot of men that didn't have the dad, is they don't understand what that looks like. And then they get caught in the cycles, and I think about, your stepdad and, the other men, they're caught in the cycles because nobody showed them how it's supposed to be,
No one did. And the other thing too, that I think, my wife and I barely fight, which I'll be honest with you. I think we're doing our kids a big disservice by not allowing to see us disagree, because I'm just being real with you, we just don't. But 2 years ago, I'll never forget it, we were out on our deck and my wife and I were having a disagreement, a very respectful one. I've known her for 25 years. We've never called each other a name, ever. We've never hit below the belt. We've always used a tone with each other that is no different than how you and I are talking right now. My son, who's 15 now, was 13 at the time. He came up and we were on the deck, and my wife and I he could tell that we were disagreeing. And he's like, it was completely foreign to him. He goes, are you guys fighting? I was like, no, we're disagreeing. He's like, are you going to get a divorce? I was like, no. I was like, no, we're not getting a divorce. I was like, you know what? Pull up a seat. I want you to see this. I want you to see how adults work things out, because you and your brother will just go and punch each other, right? But this is how adults get through. And I was like, and I want you to take note of something. You won't see me and mom call each other names. You won't see us yell at each other. You'll see us be very respectful. And when the other person is talking, the other person listens. I want you to really take this in and feel free to ask us questions. And my son sat there for 15 minutes and watched me and my wife argue, quote unquote. But he did. And we worked it out. And I looked at him and I was like, what did you see? What did you learn? And he was able to share some things that he saw that we didn't realize that we were even doing. Good things. He was able to compare it to how he resolves conflict with his brother. He's like, yeah, we don't do that. We just yell. It doesn't work, does it? So, yeah.
That's awesome. I love it. So one of the questions I like to ask all my guests is this: what is your best advice for men?
Best advice for men is become a master communicator. Now, there are several elements in there and I'm just going to name them off. Being a master communicator, most men will tell you they'll use 2 words when they talk about communication. I want more or better. More or better. That doesn't solve a thing. It's almost like if I was your doctor and you came to me as a patient and I said, hey, Josh, I want you to get healthy. And you're like, what does that mean? Do I have cancer? Do I have diabetes? Do I have high cholesterol? Like, do I have gout? What do I have? Right? Like, no, just go get more healthy. Go get in better health. And that would not give you any direction whatsoever. And I'm a big proponent of, if you don't know the skills, you got to learn the skills. Being a master communicator are these skills. Okay. Number one, you have to be an incredible listener. Okay. So you have to be quiet and you have to listen, right? And then you have to reflect back and allow the person to know that you're listening. Because the most important thing for people is to feel seen, heard, and connected, especially your wife. So using a skill set called tactical empathy is a big one. Chris Voss teaches this, tactical empathy. Tactical empathy is allowing the other person to feel seen and heard, right? Not solving your wife's problems. Don't fix it. Please, for the love of God, if you take anything from what I'm going to tell you in the next 2 or 3 minutes, don't fix your wife's problems unless, number one, you ask, or she asks you. Sometimes if I'm confused, I'll just ask, hey, do you need me to listen? Or do you want to talk about solutions? What feels best to you right now? And my wife will tell me, I don't want solutions. I just want to vent. Cool. That's what I'm here for. So emotional validation is another skill set that's super important. Emotional validation is where the other person knows not only that they're being listened to, but that you are labeling what they're probably feeling. So like, sounds like you might be angry right now. No, I'm not angry. I'm actually really sad. Okay. Feels like you're sad. Tell me more, right? That's emotional validation. Emotional validation is using the other person's words to allow them to know that you're hearing them, right? The other thing too is using things like labels, mirrors. Mirrors is a great way to ask why without ever using the word why. So like if I come home, my wife is like, oh my God, I've had a horrible day today. Like one of my first knee-jerk reactions would be like, what do you mean you had a horrible day? Why? Right? Nothing puts someone in a corner more than that word why. But if I say something like, you had a horrible day, all I did was repeat the last 3 words that she said. And then she's going to tell me why. You had a horrible day?
Usually my wife says, I've had a horrible day. And I'm like, okay, I'll see you later.
Right. Okay, bye. I'll be out cutting grass. No, but if she says, hey, I'll give you an example of all the things that I just said, and I'm going to tell you how they were used. Okay. So if I come home, my wife's like, oh my God, I had a horrible day today. You had a horrible day? That's a mirror. Yes, I had a horrible day. The kids were so relentless today. Mason, I couldn't get him off of his phone and he argued with me. It drove me crazy. I yelled at him. I took his phone away. It drove me crazy. And then, the Lawson, he's just so upset because he wants to go play with a friend. And then he got in trouble and then he had to go to his room and it was just a mess. I felt like all I did was yell all day. Man, feels like today was incredibly overwhelming. Now, what I just used there was tactical empathy. Feels like what happened today was incredibly overwhelming with a label. That overwhelming is a label. In that moment, I didn't fix a thing. I emotionally validated where my wife was in that moment. How can I best support you right now? What feels right? You want to talk? Talk more? Do you want to get out of here? Do you want to go for a quick happy hour, me and you? Do you want to go meet your friends? Do you want to go for a run? What feels best to you? Right. And those are options, right? Because sometimes when someone's in a super emotionally charged state, sometimes they just want to hear like, hey, what are the things what levers can I pull right now? Can I sit here and talk? Can I get away from the situation? What do I need to do? But I didn't tell her to do a thing. I asked, right? So those are, and here's the cool thing. When you're using those skills like emotional validation, tactical empathy, mirrors, and labels, it's going to make you a better listener because you're listening for key things that you can reflect back to that person, right? You can't do that unless you're actively listening, right?
Those tools sound like they are extremely valuable. And I know that even myself, I'm struggling to learn some of those things, as I tend to be very problem solving and analytical, and I can hear the things she's saying, and I can almost always see the clear solution, you know?
Yep, of course.
And, you know, the kids are being bad today. I'll be right back. And then I'm going to go spank them all, you know, or whatever, you know, and that doesn't necessarily answer what her issue is, you know? And so I'm working on that, and I'm learning that. And it's actually, I think it's been a little more difficult for me than I thought that it would be. And yeah, so those are tools that I am learning and working on. And I have found that and the other thing that I've been trying to do is look at where, especially when, like, if she's communicating out of hurt or brokenness, which sometimes can happen, then I have to look at it and look at the source of that. Where's that coming from? You know, this isn't my wife talking. This is her, you know, when she was younger and when she's hurt and where it comes from. And so I have to just back up for a minute here and validate and listen and not crush it, you know, because if I start looking at what's happening in the moment rather than where it comes from, man, I can get, it becomes a mess real fast, you know?
Yeah, it absolutely will. If any of your listeners just go to YouTube and Google, "It's Not About the Nail."
Mm-hmm.
It is the most hysterical and video and so accurate and just not to spoil it, but there's this man and this wife, they're sitting on a couch. This woman literally has a nail sticking out of her head, right? And she's talking to her husband, and she's like, "I don't know, like I just feel like I have this pain, like this headache, like, and it's like right here in the middle." And you can see like the look on the guy's face, like, what is wrong with you? He's like, he goes, "Well, you do have a nail sticking right out of your head." And she's like, "It's not about the nail. It's just not about the nail. You never listen to me." And he's like, "No, I'm pretty sure it's about the nail." And she's like, "It's not about you." And they go back and forth and back and forth. And then finally she's like describing everything again. He's like, "That's," and in a very demeaning way. I do not suggest you talk to your wife like this. He's like,
Right.
"That sounds tough." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, you understand. Thank you so much for listening to me." Right. And the guy is looking at her like she's nuts. Right. Now, I don't expect you. Yeah. I do not recommend that you listen to your wife that way. She'll pick up on that in a millisecond. Right. But it's a very appropriate video for the communication style between a man and a wife.
And, I know there are some men that I know who operate at that same kind of communication style. I mean, I think generally we operate a certain way. We're problem solvers, you know, generally, but there's always that one guy that's an exception to the rule. And so it's a tool. Heck, even we can act out of that sometimes, you know what I mean? Like any one of us, any moment can act in the, when we're overwhelmed with emotion or whatever, we can slip into those same kinds of seeking the validation, wanting to be heard rather than wanting to problem solve. And so I think those skills are going to be helpful for us, not even just with our wife, but across the board. So, and really this is kind of where I think it's a great place to talk about how can people learn more of these tools and maybe learn them from you. I know you've got a lot of that information available. If they want to find that from you, where's the best place to find that?
Yeah. So right now, as it stands, we're actually creating courses around this. They're not out yet. They'll probably be out in September. We're going to have a course on conflict resolution. We're going to have a course on connection and intimacy and overall communication. So those will be some powerful courses that men can take on their own. I'm a big proponent. This may sound self-serving. I don't mean to be. It's just the way people learn. Okay. You can listen to a podcast. You can listen to an audiobook. You can take a course, right? The issue with that is when you do that, you're exposing yourself to an idea, right? Or a lesson. The gap becomes, how do I go put this into practice now? And make the pivots that I need to make when I go to put this in practice, because it's not going to be flawless or perfect. There are things that are, if you're trying to use a conflict resolution skill and it goes sideways, then what do you do? Right? I'm a big proponent of being in community. men are tribal beings. And unfortunately, we have a lot of men who are walking the planet who are living this quiet life of desperation and isolation. We're surrounded physically by people, but mentally and emotionally, we don't have that tribe. We are, like it or not, we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Dad Edge Alliance is our community where we help men optimize what we call the 5 dimensions of being a husband, man, and father, right? That's your marriage, that's your parenting, leadership, your finances, and your health. What we do in there is we teach men these skills, right? And we do it in a community fashion, a group coaching environment through experiential learning. That way, when, like, let's say we're teaching conflict resolution and they go out and try to resolve conflict and they're like, hey guys, like I came back and they came back and be like, hey, I did this and this. And then my wife said this, like, now what do I do? Oh, well, now try this, do this, pivot this way, pivot this way, pivot this way. When you have community and guidance like that, you become way more efficient and proficient quicker, right? Than trying to learn something like this on your own. Right? Or trying to read a book, that you'll probably forget about the skill set the next week anyway. So if men are curious about that, you can go to gooddadproject.com/alliance. Depending on when this airs, you might have to go to thedadedge.com/alliance because we're moving everything over there.
Awesome. Hey, Larry, I really appreciate you being on the show, and you've had some fantastic insight. It's been an amazing conversation. And I feel like I've learned a lot, and I know our listeners have learned a lot as well.
Thank you, man. This was a pleasure. And by the way, just for your listeners out there, hey, Josh did not pay me to say this. He had no idea that I would say this, but Josh is the real deal, man. He does this podcast out of the kindness of his heart. You can't ask for a better host on this topic. So if you guys are here and listening, just know that Josh does this just very heartfelt, very genuine. And, he is here to obviously change the game for men in the world. So thank you for what you're doing, Josh.
Well, thank you as well, man. I appreciate your work, and it's good stuff. And you guys go check out Larry and see the work he's doing. So thank you, man. I appreciate it. And look forward to talking to you again in the future, man.
Sounds great, my man.
All right. Get better from COVID too. That doesn't sound like fun. So we've been there. It wasn't a blast.
It's not a blast. I mean, I'm up on the upswing now, so I'm okay.
That's good.
But yeah,
that's good.
Not fun.
Awesome. Well, get better, man. And good talking to you.
You too.
As always, guys, if you appreciate what you're seeing here at Manlihood, all you've got to do is be a part of it. You don't just have to watch it. You don't just have to listen to it. You can interact and be a part of things. So head over to our Facebook group, the Manlihood Man Cave. Weigh in on the discussions there. If you want to ask a question that we can feature on our podcast or on our show or on our social media, there's a place on our website, manlihood.com, where you can do that. We've got some resources for you, and we're working on even more resources. I'm really working hard on a program to help men be better men, help them be better fathers, or whatever area you want to improve in life. I'm working on that, and I'm hoping to bring you that early 2022. But in the meantime, we do have some resources for you. If you go to Amazon, we've got some books there. You go to the manlihood.com/store. We've got some t-shirts, hoodies, books that you can have that'll help you to level up on your journey as a man. We love you guys. We appreciate you guys. Please don't forget to support Larry Hagner. His work at the Dad Edge is phenomenal. Love you guys. Appreciate you guys. And we'll see you next time.
If you want to be a better man, check out our website, manlihood.com, for blogs, videos, and more from our Manlihood team. Men, you can also join our private Facebook group, Manlihood Man Cave, where you can meet up with a band of brothers who will challenge you and help you on your journey of manhood. This episode is produced by Hatcher Media for manlihood.com. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you're listening to the show. Tune in again for more of the Manlihood Mancast.